insurrection. And among those arrests, several active service members and dozens of veterans alleged to have taken part in the riot. Now, Defense Department officials are considering new regulations on service members involved in extremist groups. From the Washington Post, quote, Pentagon officials are considering new restrictions on service members' interactions with far-right groups, part of the military's reckoning with extremism. But the measures could trigger legal challenges from critics who say they would violate First Amendment rights. Joining our conversation, Paul Rieckhoff, president of Righteous Media, host of the Independent Americans podcast, and the founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America. Thank you so much for being back on this topic. What is the sweet spot of sort of protecting the active duty troops and not infringing on freedom of association and speech?
We're going to find out, Nicole, because they've been dragging their feet for too long. Yeah. And I think the bottom line is they got to put the pedal down here. I mean, insurrectionists took over the Capitol. We know there are folks in the active duty military. We know that reservists were part of the insurrection on January 6th. And we've got a major problem that I think President Biden correctly identified in his recent address to Congress as the #1 national security threat. So it's time to put the pedal down, get serious here. The Pentagon's been slow. Trump totally avoided it. And really a number of presidents have let it go on for too long. So there's nothing more serious. There's nothing more urgent. And yeah, we're going to get into some free speech issues, but we also can't have oath keepers, in the Marine Corps. We got to put the pedal down here and finally get serious as a country about this threat.
Can you unwind this for me from people just have, and I think it's in most cases justified. We view the military as in most cases the best of us, the people who walk the walk and don't just talk the talk when it comes to patriotism. How does this happen that some of them are drawn to these militia groups and white supremacist groups?
Well, the military is still a reflection of our country. The actual proportion of men that were in the insurrection reflects the proportion of veteran men in the population. But the difference is they're more powerful. They're trained in military operations. They're trained in counterintelligence. So the stakes are much higher. But they get converted just like average Americans do. But we haven't fought hard enough to deter average Americans from going to extremism, and we haven't fought it in the military as well. So from the Pentagon all the way down, it's got to be about ensuring they can't become members of this group. It's scanning on social media. It's about being as difficult on them as I was about a drug test when I went through 20 years ago. It seems like they were harder about getting people for smoking weed than they were about being in an extremist group. So it's got to be a full court press. And I really think Biden and the Secretary of Defense are doing the right things. But as a country, we're still taking our eye off the ball. I mean, there are hundreds potentially of these insurrectionists that are still out in the streets. If they were ISIS, we would have the whole country mobilized around them. But for some reason here, we seem to be dragging our feet. So the FBI's got to keep the pedal down, and the American public's got to keep the pedal down.
How does this sentence end? The problem of extremists in the military is worse than anyone knows. We don't know the answer, bad and getting worse. I mean, can you just give me your assessment of the state of this problem right now today?
I think bad, and we hope getting better. We don't know to what extent it's infiltrated the military, but we know this is a problem in some of our NATO allies as well. And, right-wing extremism has been a challenge around the Western world. So we don't really know, but we do know that we haven't done the right things to protect our capital. We haven't done the right things to screen within the military. And we haven't held people accountable. These people in Congress, many of them were complicit. Many of them have turned a blind eye. Many of them just want to forget. But this, in my view, is one of the most catastrophic events of our lifetime from a national security, a political, and even a moral perspective. So this should be the #1 issue for everyone in Congress until we can sleep well at night. The guy you just had on did not exactly leave us with any confidence here. And I think it cuts to the core of how serious this is, not just in the Republican Party, but in all political leadership.
Well, and just speaking of that, I mean, this idea to running against Trump after 5 months ago, seeing fit to vote for him, and I understand that. I hear it. People have their breaking point wherever it is, but it feels like the risk of extremism sort of being greenlit in a permission structure existing in the military should be a line for someone other than Liz Cheney. I want to ask you to come back because I think I want to hear from you what we can do. What are the messages? What are the messages to push out and what are the messages to flood in? Because this feels like it's flashing, at least bright yellow, maybe starting to flash red. And you know more about it than anyone we get to talk to. So if I could put you on the spot on live TV, please come back.
You got it, Nicole, anytime.
Thank you for spending time with us today. Be sure to tune into his Independent Americans podcast with his guest, one of my favorite humans from Texas, Paul Begala.